Stuff's getting forwarded over there now. Every election cycle, there are a few challenges to signatures gathered to put a candidate or a proposition on the ballot. But tonight, an unprecedented number of challenges have been filed against candidates from both parties, and it could impact some political careers. Now, one of the cases involves State Representative Austin Smith, who ended his bid for re-election just yesterday amid allegations that he forged some of his signatures. Now, one of the highest profile politicians accused of filing fake signatures is Democratic congressional candidate Marlene Woods, the widow of former Attorney General Grant Woods. A spokeswoman for her campaign dismissed the allegations as baseless, ranging from comical to spurious. And longtime election attorney Roy Herrera represents some of the candidates who stand accused, and he says he's never seen so many cases of potential signature fraud referred to the AG's office.
I think that's more unusual. I mean, I'm sure of thinking in prior cycles whether that actually occurred or not, and I can't really think of that happening. Now, that being said, this could be just the position of the Secretary of State office to refer, any kind of allegations like that in any case, whether they're founded or unfounded, to the Attorney General, and then the Attorney General will then make a decision.
Now, a spokesman for the Secretary of State's office says they have always forwarded these alleged cases to the Attorney General, but they say that it might seem like a new policy because they've never before seen so many cases forwarded on to the AG. Now, likewise, the Attorney General's office declined to comment about ongoing investigations. But Nicole, Jared, there could be harsh penalties for politicians found guilty of forging signatures. According to top election officials or lawyers that I spoke to, a candidate found guilty of forgery could be banned for running for office for up to 5 years.
So we know with Smith's case, it was like a specific chunk of 100 signatures. Are these allegations that you've gotten a look at today, are they specific like that? And who's making these allegations? Is it something the Secretary of State's office has fine-lined as a problem?
No, it's coming from the candidate's opponents. In many cases. That's in the past, that's what we've seen a lot of. They will accuse the other side of saying, like, your signatures aren't valid for various reasons. In the past, we'd see reasons like, oh, they're not registered voters, they're not, this, that, or the other thing. What we haven't seen is so many cases and accusations of fraud, and so many of these cases being forwarded to the Secretary or to the AG's office. Now, how fast are these things going to get taken care of? Well, obviously, time is of the essence. We'll be seeing some of these things play out next week in court. It should be adjudicated pretty quickly. Some of these are pretty easy to decide and dismiss, and we're already seeing that some of the cases, those 15 cases, have already been resolved one way or the other, with some people off the ballot, some people resigning, some people being cleared of any wrongdoing. So this moves pretty quickly.
Still quite a bit to sort out with that ballot deadline quickly approaching here. Dennis, thank you.